Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Books Off the Beaten Path. And today we're going to be talking about Shakespeare. Yes, that's right, the bard himself. But we're not going to be talking about it the way you think we are. Like, I'm not going to go the traditional route with the plays and the sonnets and everything like that. We're going to read around Shakespeare. And I've decided to focus on three particular topics on my Books Off the Beaten Path today, and I have notes on everything, so you'll see these little pink sticky notes everywhere. But we're going to talk about the authorship question, the First Folio, people's relationships with William Shakespeare, and then some fun fiction at the end. I've got 11 books. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that. Don't click off. I'll go fast. But the first topic that we're going to talk about is who wrote Shakespeare, the authorship question. Now, if you guys are not familiar with this, some people say that a poor boy from Stratford-upon-Avon, which was really a backwoods kind of little dinky town at the time, could not have written this well. Now, I personally think that Shakespeare was Shakespeare and that he wrote all of his stuff, but there are a lot of people that think, no, it was Francis Bacon, or it was Christopher Marlowe, or if it was, even somebody else. But so the first book I want to start off with is this one right here. I've had it for years. It is Who Wrote Shakespeare by John Mitchell. And this one was, I think it's a really good starting place to discuss the definitive question of authorship. And it's a really good book. I don't know if you can still find it or if it's out of print, but it's a really good book. And it lists all the suspects, like Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, and it gives all of the pros and cons and the clues and everything like that for what might have happened and, why these people might be the real authors of Shakespeare and everything like that. It doesn't really draw a lot of conclusions, which I like, but it's a really good introduction into the authorship of Shakespeare. If you're into, he didn't actually write it, but I think that he did. Okay, so also on the authorship, we're going to go with this one that I just recently read called Shakespeare's Library. Now, I put this in the question of authorship because one of the points that people make about old Willie is that when he died, and you have his will, and we do have his will, he doesn't leave one single book to anyone. He doesn't mention one single book. And so then it's kind of like, well, we know that he read books, or he should have read books, because he lifted a lot of his plots from other books, from other writings. So where were his books? If he actually wrote all of these plays, he would have had to have some access to books, but he doesn't mention anything like that in the will. And this one was really good. This one talked a lot about where his library could be. Maybe he gave all of his books away before he even went back to Stratford-on-Avon. Maybe, it wasn't that concerning to him. But this one was really good and really fascinating about his library, where it could be, all the people that have been searching for it. Very good. I put that in the authorship question. Now, the last one I have in the authorship is Bill Bryson, who don't you guys just love Bill Bryson? Woo! It's a very short book. It's Bill Bryson's Shakespeare. Now, you'll notice the library thing on here, and I want to quantify that. I actually own this book, but once again, I have lent it out to someone, and I have never gotten it back. So, you know who you are that I lent this to, so please give it back, because now I have to go to the library to get it. But anyway, this is fantastic. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bill Bryson. I may do a whole thing on his stuff, but he's a travel writer and he's very, very funny. And so his main point in this is that we don't know a lot about Shakespeare, but that's okay. It's not unusual for us not to know a lot about a man who lived in the 1500s. Because they didn't keep records like we did, and why are we expecting to know a lot about him? And he just kind of went on and lived his life without taking us into consideration. But it's very good and it's very funny. There's one section here about a guy who does a lot of research on some Shakespeare stuff in a salt mine. And if you're spending a lot of time in a salt mine, you're going to go loopy. And this guy does go loopy, and it's hilarious. I mean, not that insanity is hilarious, but you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the next section that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the First Folio. And when we talk about the First Folio, let me just give you a brief description of what that is. After Shakespeare died, his friends got together and put together all of his plays. And they put it in this thing called the First Folio. And the actual first edition of the First Folio is, I believe, housed currently, well, I'm pretty sure it is, at the Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., which is one of my all-time favorite places. And I'm going to put some pictures up here of the Shakespeare Library when I last went, and also a picture of my mom and our tour guide, who like bonded completely, had the most wonderful time. I loved it there. Yes, it's haunted. Yes, they, have problems with the books moving around and stuff like that, and the lights going on and off, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, so here's my First Folio books. This one is called The Millionaire and the Bard. And the Folgers Shakespeare Library, this is the Folgers coffee family. And so it is Henry Folger, and he was the one that was obsessed with Shakespeare, and he was the one that started the library, and he was the one that went out and found the First Folio. And they've got so many other things in there, and it's just amazing, amazing, amazing. You need to go. And you need to read this book, because this book, I read it when doing some research on this, and oh, it's good. Oh, it's good. If you like that Gilded Age time period too, sort of that Edith Wharton, Gilded Age, I think is a Netflix thing at the moment, you will love this. Okay, so then I got this one right here. Take my notes off of it. The Book of William. And this is about the First Folio. And it kind of goes through different chapters about how the First Folio came to be and where it bounced around, everything like that. And I will admit that I only read the part about the Folger Library because that was really kind of the only part I was interested in. But, oh, it's fantastic. They talk about going to level C, which is the Folger Library has a big bank vault underneath it, just way underneath the ground where they keep the First Folio. And this guy gets permission to go down and see it for the first time. And he talks about that whole process of how he gets down into there to level C and how big the First Folio is. Like, it's a big book. And as I said, at the moment, the current street value of it, the street value, like I'm comparing it to heroin or something, is $80 million. $80 million. So, and I think it would probably even fetch higher than that. So I was thinking, if you guys want to start a fund, we could get a fund and we could all get together and raise 80 million. What am I even talking about? What would we do with it? Where would we keep it? Where would we keep it? We can't keep it here. We'd have to keep it in Vault C. All right. Enough about the Folgers Library. If you get a chance to go, you should do it. Now, my next section is books about relationships, people's personal relationships with reading Shakespeare. And this is a really fun section. Years ago, I read Harold Bloom's Shakespeare and the Invention of the Human, and it was a challenge book for me because it's a weighty tome. And sometimes I would have to read the sentences a couple of times to make sure I got it. But Harold Bloom, if you guys are not familiar, he is the professor of humanity, or a Sterling professor of humanities at Yale. I think he's deceased. If you're not deceased, Harold, sorry, but I thought you were. But anyway, so I got this one from the library, and it's a shorter one. It's called Bloom's Biocritiques. And this is the one where you want to impress and amaze your friends if you read this one. Oh, Bob, for heaven's sakes. Bob wants to talk about Shakespeare. He loves Harold Bloom. And so when Harold Bloom showed up, he just had to come up here. I'm going to put you on the floor. You can read the Harold Bloom book later. Okay, so here we go. William Shakespeare, Harold Bloom. Now it's kind of annotated. And on this one, you've just got essays. And you've got essays by Harold Bloom, of course, Samuel Johnson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's kind of just a short essay, really highbrow, really gives you a good academic overview of Shakespeare and why he is important. And this one is really, I would recommend this one because I think that sometimes you really need to read higher out of your comfort zone. I don't know, maybe you're already reading stuff like that, but it's out of my comfort zone because it's a little bit higher esoteric. Am I using that word right? I don't think I am. See why I need to read these books? I agree with you. I know, that was a flub that I'll never forget. Okay, the next one under relationships is one that I read years ago, but it's still one of my all-time favorites. It's near and dear to my heart. It's called Will and Me. And it is written by Dominic Dromgoole. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's about this guy who ends up being the artistic director for the Globe Theatre, like the new Globe Theatre that they made in London several years back. And this talks about how Shakespeare figured out through his whole life and everything. And that's interesting. But the absolute best part, I have marked it right here, is the walk. He takes this walk. This whole section is called The Walk. He takes this walk from Stratford-upon-Avon, from the Holy Trinity Church, where Shakespeare is buried. And they walk, he and a couple of friends walk all the way to London to the Globe Theatre, and they just talk Shakespeare. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I felt like I was on the walk. I want to take the walk. And I don't want to just take a walk like that with Shakespeare. I'd love to do a Jane Austen walk, a Sherlock Holmes walk. It was just the fantastic idea that they were going to walk, and all the way along they were going to talk about what Shakespeare meant to them, the different plays and what they loved and everything like that. So Will and Me, if you can still get it, is 2 thumbs up. Wonderful. Now then, I got one from the library that I haven't read yet, but I did hear an interview with this woman. Sorry, I had to check and see what Bob was doing. He's getting into some other books over there. He's obviously upset that I wouldn't let him read the Bloom right now. Anyway, so this one is about a Shakespeare professor. Her name is Laura Bates. This is nonfiction, and what she does is she goes into prisons. And we're talking some pretty tough prisons. She goes into prisons and they put on a Shakespearean play. And she gets the prisoners to put on the play. And it talks about how, difficult it is for the prisoners, sometimes just reading it. Other times how transformative it is for the prisoners. Anyway, I heard all about this on NPR, and I cannot wait to read this because I thought it was such a wonderful program. I thought it was such a great program. All right, so now we're going to go into our fun fiction section. All right, so you want to read some Shakespeare fiction. You want to read some fiction that has to do with Shakespeare, but sort of on the peripherals. The first one you got to read is Interred with Their Bones. Once again, I had this and I let it out, so now I'm stuck with the large print, which I always feel a little bit embarrassed when I check out from. I'm just not there yet. I want to tell the librarians, this is the only copy you have, but I'm just not there yet reading the large print. But this one is fantastic. This one is Interred with Their Bones. And let's see who wrote this. Jennifer Lee Carroll. And this one just blew me away. It's very Da Vinci Code-like. She gets a mysterious box. She has to follow the clues. The murder victim was killed in the same manner as Hamlet's father, which, if you guys remember, he had poison poured in his ear. That's what the ghost said, allegedly, poison poured in his ear. And this one is just too fun for words. There's a lot of hidden tunnels, and they go to the Shakespeare Library, the Folgers Library, and they're running around Yale and Yale University in these tunnels and everything like that. And it is super fun. And you'll get a good smattering of Shakespeare on that. The second one I want to give you is by the same author. and this one is called Haunt Me Still. In my opinion, it doesn't hold up as well as Interred with Their Bones, but it's still really, really good. Now, my favorite Shakespearean play is Macbeth. And I love Macbeth because it's very supernaturally, it's got the witches in it, which you know I love that kind of stuff. And I just think it's all about power and how power corrupts and everything like that. It's got ghosts in it. Of course, a lot of the plays do have ghosts in it. But I mean, this one, Macbeth, is just to do or die for me. I love it. But this one is about Macbeth. And this one, she goes to Scotland to meet with the widow of a collector, Shakespearean artifact collector. And they want to put on Macbeth. And one of the things in the theater is that there's an old tradition that you cannot say the name Macbeth if you're doing the play Macbeth. You have to call it the Scottish play. And so they're talking about the Scottish play a lot. There's a lot of those theatrical superstitions that come into it. And it's just a super fun read. It's a little more graphic on the death than I would particularly prefer. She could have toned that down a little, but still wonderful. Now, if you want to go for the lightest of all, just like Shakespeare light, so light you can barely see him in there, but you can still see him. That is going to be any of the Ellie Alexander Bake Shop mysteries. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, what's a cozy mystery doing in all of this? Well, the reason it's got some sprinklings and smatterings of Shakespeare in it is that this whole series takes place in Ashland, Oregon. And Ashland, Oregon is known for its Shakespeare Festival. And this festival lasts from February to November. And they do 10 plays, 10 Shakespearean plays. And this little town is all Shakespeare pretty much all the time. And so anytime you read one of these bake shop mysteries, you're going to get something about the theater and something about Ashland, Oregon and the Shakespeare Festival. I mean, you really are. And I love me some Ellie Alexander. When I need some comfort, and she's got great, just the food talk. I'm talking about, the food that they make at Tort, the bake shop. I love it. But again, it's still got that Shakespeare tie-in. So why did I talk about Shakespeare today? Well, September, traditionally on BookTube, is Shake-tember, where they want you to read something Shakespearean. Usually people read a play, they get together in groups and they decide on a play. I think there's one group that's doing The Merchant of Venice and one group is doing The Taming of the Shrew and everything. But I just... you can get bogged down in Shakespeare and you can, forget the joy of it. But these books, the ones that I have selected to share with you, really show the joy of William Shakespeare and the mystery of him and the intrigue and how people have become obsessed by him and how his writings really changes. Okay, Bob is really, really mad about the bloom thing. Sorry about that. I'll have to put my cross stitch back up there in a few minutes. But anyway, on that note, since I now have a wrecked cross stitch scroll behind me that I need to get together, and Bob decided to crash the whole video today, I just wanted to say, enjoy your September. Read something either Shakespearean itself or about Shakespeare, and I hope that the books that I shared with you today are something that you guys can enjoy. Thanks so much. Oh, I forgot to say, smash that subscribe button, give me a like, send me a comment. I'm really getting some good vibes from YouTube. I'm really moving up, and I really appreciate it. If you guys want to see more of stuff like this, then let me know. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.